Welcome back to the Off the Bar podcast. My name is Brandon. I'm joined with Ben, and today we're talking about a topic that was actually suggested to us by a fellow podcaster, Raw Sports Talk. Links in the description to his channel. We are talking about a topic that he DM'd us about on Instagram, which you guys should also be following down, and links also in the description. He said, I'm not that most well-versed in soccer, but I would love to know what is your take is when the MLS tries to pay one of those aging superstars or the soon-to-be superstar who ends up turning out to be a dud. So we're actually going to expand upon that a little bit. We're going to talk about that, like what we think about, transfers that are coming in, like some of the older players, some of the veterans of Europe that go into the MLS, expecting a retirement check or just trying to play football at a semi-high level, right? It's not Europe, but it's still pretty decent game. And I think we're also going to talk about the fact that we're actually seeing the MLS turn into more of a developmental league for not only Americans, but also for a lot of European talent as well, and also why there's also a lot of American talent that are actually in other leagues and not just the MLS. So we're going to jump straight into that. So I guess the first topic we'll talk about is the veterans or some of the aging superstars that want one last final big paycheck or big payday, and they look at the MLS and when they get offered $100K plus a week because I think a lot of MLS teams look at just their names alone, it gets fans excited. So we've seen that over the years with the David Villa, Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard, Zlatan. There's just been a new one, Nani, Pirlo. We've seen all these superstars, and it all the way goes back to David Beckham when he first moved to LA Galaxy. Ben, what's your take on if MLS teams should still continue to try to sign those aging superstars?
It's not a really reason, and we're going to get into the developmental kind of part of it, but it's not a real reason as to if they should.
Right.
It's actually statistically bad for them to do something like that. So it's called the David Beckham rule, but it's a designated player rule. Each club gets 3 designated players that they can sign over the wage that would be applicable to the salary cap. So yeah, I know the MLS is salary cap. It's such an Americanized league.
You don't have promotions or anything like that. It's all standings and shit. It's funny.
Which is funny. I was talking to someone really off bar, real quickly. I was talking to someone that said, "Imagine if NBA had promotion and demotion." I was like, "There's no way because New York would go down every year." Okay, but anyways, so back to the MLS. It's called the David Beckham rule because David Beckham was the first major superstar to go to the MLS,
right?
Or the first notable superstar to go to the MLS,
right?
The problem with the designated player rule is that there is barely any return of investment. So you look at players like Andre Pirlo, like Steven Gerrard, like Lampard. There are certain cases, and we'll get into this. I'll talk about them in a little bit. But there are certain cases of the designated player that do give a good return on investment. But for again, Pirlo, Gerrard, Lampard, David Villa, they don't give enough money back to the club, as in a financial and marketable sense.
Well, I'm sure shirt sales it helps just because you have that in brand. Let's say Gerrard, for example, he goes to LA Galaxy, and he because of his name, because it's Gerrard, because he's a Liverpool legend, the fact that he is an English icon, right? I honestly think it's not gonna be as big of a return on investment maybe selling the player back-wise or maybe trying to get some return on investment. But I think commercially it doesn't help. It doesn't hurt.
No. What I'm saying is we're talking about what they're moving into the transition of the developmental league. But they... so basically, there's some cases like Wayne Rooney, like Zlatan, who just have so much around them that you can market them, you can get them into ads, you can get them into everything.
Yeah.
And...
We really saw that with Zlatan. As soon as he moved, I just saw a shit ton of Samsung ads for the World Cup and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it was the first. I remember it was the first thing I think I saw a whole ESPN actually cover it in depth, which is from the MLS, which is incredible. But yeah, the designated player rule is basically what kind of drove that, and I think the MLS needed it in the beginning They needed someone to come over and be that kind of gap,
Right.
To bridge the kind of gap, and David Beckham was that person. But yeah, I think that's kind of the reason, and of course, you have even like Didier Drogba, Thierry Henry. You still have those players who don't give you the best return of investment, even if they had good campaigns.
Right.
And I think that was the main problem with the development with that rule.
Right. I think it's fair to say that the MLS, we're going to get back, again, we're going to go into the developmental side and why we think it could be like the next Eredivisie in terms of producing young talent. But I think it also goes back to, the MLS is also a place for people that want to restart their careers or want another chance in Europe, but can't get into European sides just because poor quality or just because they can't, no one's bidding in Europe.
Sure.
I think we saw a good example of this just this season. Montreal Impact signed, not Montreal, Vancouver. Which one? Montreal. It's Montreal. It's a Canadian side.
Okay.
Montreal signed Victor Wanyama. I mean, obviously he hasn't been the best for Spurs, right? He's slowly been regressing in form over the years, but the MLS could prove to be a good restart or good quick jump back into his career.
Sure, and those are not Victor Wanyama per se, but those are the kind of players that they wanted to use with the designated player. That was the ideal kind of player, someone who's getting into their prime or in the middle of their prime, someone like Carlos Vela, like a Sebastian Giovinco, like a Joseph Martinez, who have tried going into Europe or were in Europe and didn't do well, came back and is now. It has shown to be a great return of investment. Right.
I mean, you hit on at home with Joseph Martinez. For Atlanta United, he's been killing it. He helped them win a.
He's their player.
Yeah. I mean, he's down with an ACL injury, but
no, still he's there.
Right. He's been a very good player for Atlanta United. He's helped them win a few trophies, I do believe, an MLS Cup or two.
Yeah.
He's also won MVP one year. I remember. They're Sebastian Giovinco's another one. I don't know if you mentioned him.
I did, yeah.
Okay, I was just making sure. Again, there's a lot of players that fail in Europe but come over and they have a good start to their career, and I think what you're saying with that rule, it makes sense. I think also you're gonna still have the issue of signing that marquee player, signing a big name player,
Sure.
a big just because his name is big, and I think we really saw that with Rooney.
When Rooney showed good return of investment.
Well, no, he did. But I'm just saying because Rooney after a year and a half wanted to leave.
Same thing with Zlatan, but again, it's all about return of investment with this thing. I'm not trying to downgrade what you're saying because the idea of what you're saying is right.
Yeah.
We talked about Pirlo, Gerrard, Lampard. They didn't really show good return of investment. With the team, they didn't really help the team much, even if they had stellar years, the stellar career at the club. There are some cases with a Rooney, with a Zlatan, and probably with Chicharito, just because Chicharito is still the biggest Mexican player in the world.
Well, yeah, that's
now,
true.
And they want to combat Liga MX, who's growing in popularity and has more viewers than in the MLS.
Yeah, it also doesn't help that that Chicharito signed for the biggest club in LA, right?
Yeah, I mean
because LA, because it's California, close to Mexico, more south. LA is kind of in the central, but more south towards San Francisco.
It has a big Mexican community.
But yes, yeah. But I'm trying to get to that. LA does have a big mix of Hispanic community in there. So yeah, that's a big name because they're gonna think of Chicharito, the guy that was a super sub for Manchester United, the guy that was at Bayern Leverkusen, the guy that was at Real Madrid. This is a big name guy.
You know the stat? It's Chicharito in Mexico. Every time he plays, birth rate goes up and death rate and violence rate goes down.
Is that true?
That's actually true.
Damn, he's the fucking Messiah.
Yeah, he is. We talk about return on investment. That's what really the designated player rule is. That is supposed to be used for.
Right.
Because you look at the designated player rule. In the beginning, I think in 2014, the average age of it was 28 point something.
Right.
Right now, it's actually up, but it's 25.3, and then before that, it was 23, and in 2016, it was 23 point something.
Right.
So again, that's going to go into the developmental thing, but the general consensus, the general idea of that rule was for players who are just starting to get into the prime. That's the ideal kind of thing. And I think a lot of teams started to use it for aging players just so they can get, just so they can get that kind of notoriety.
Right. I do want to say though, like, I think what also does hinder this argument is the fact that you have players coming out saying that I want to sign for you. Like, I've seen like a few Neymar interviews, and he's like face to face with David Beckham's like, give me a blank sheet of paper and I will sign, and I'll put my name saying once, like, I will eventually sign for Inter Miami.
No, I know, and
like Griezmann has come out, Suarez has come out, like this, Luis Suarez has come out. There's players that have come out and said like the MLS looks like a prime destination. Like, there's always talks with Ronaldo going to the MLS. There's always been talks with Messi, like the big name players, right? The big superstar players.
There's a difference. As much as I respect Gerrard and Lampard, they're no way in marketability the same as Neymar, Ronaldo, and Messi.
That's true.
Not even Griezmann, I think. Griezmann or Suarez, I don't think they even touch as well.
No, that's true. Granted, with Gerrard and Lampard, they were final years of their playing career. They wanted one last big contract. With Lampard, you can say because he was part of that Man City group towards the end.
He went to New York, which is owned by the same man.
So, like, he was part of the Man City investor group. Like, you can say, like, okay, like, that was an obvious step. But I think in my opinion, it's just, the fact that there are also big name players that have openly said, I want to play in the MLS. Or said, like, the MLS looks like a great destination to finish out my career.
No, and you look at, the MLS's key audience is the Americas. The Americas. They would want, because especially with Liga MX, if a Luis Suarez comes in, well, Uruguayans are going to start looking at that. If you have Messi, the whole world's going to look at that. Which Messi says he wants to go back to Argentina for his last.
Right. No, I'm just saying. Like, there's always been reports.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying. Like, for that, it's basically that's the thought process behind it.
Right.
Is there going to be good return on investment if you sign Ronaldo for $10 million a year or $10 million? But like that kind of idea.
Well, I think it's a double-edged sword, right? It's like financially you're gonna take a hit because, like, bringing in one of those big name players, they're gonna want a big contract because they believe they can still produce, which we've obviously saw they could. Like I think with the case being with Zlatan, like I think he had like in his 2 seasons he had like 20 plus goals in both seasons, so it's obvious that he could still produce. So they want a big contract. So financially, you're going to take a hit, obviously. But commercially, like, I think, and maybe domestically as well, like, you're going to see an uptake in ticket sales and jerseys bought and, I don't know, and merchandise and all that kind of stuff. All the other financial stuff, right? You're going to see an uptake in that just because like, it's a big name player. So that's why a big name player like a Zlatan, like a Chicharito, like all the other ones that we have said, while financially it doesn't make sense whether they come in on a free or not, while it doesn't make sense because like they're an aging superstar, commercially, like you saw, like while Zlatan, like I think we'll go back to Zlatan real quick, like we saw how well like that turned out. Like he was on the James Corden show, he was on Jimmy Kimmel, like he was on like every talk show. He was doing promotions for Samsung. He was doing all these different promotions like ads. Like I'm sure he also got that in Europe as well. But I think the fact that it was LA, the big Hollywood market, the American market, the fact that he was getting even more brand deals. Like I swear, like I follow him on Instagram. Like
he was everywhere. Basically.
Like he was like almost every other post was an ad.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to return of investment on not only the player's part but the club's part.
Right.
Sure, you're gonna pay him $10 million a year even if it comes on a free. That's still, if you sign a Ronaldo, you're gonna recoup that $10 million.
I honestly believe so.
You're gonna sell everything. You're gonna sell everything out wherever you go.
Right.
You're going to sell a lot of jerseys, especially like in Miami, it's a huge city where especially with the Hispanic community, where soccer is a focal point.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying it's Miami because a lot of people came out and said I would sign with it to Miami.
Right.
The the ability to sign someone like a Griezmann with a designated player, or something like Ronaldo or Messi or Neymar,
right?
It shows kind of not the pulling power, but it shows that the MLS still has that kind of feature that it's still kind of it's of course
it's still relevant enough soccer.
Yeah, Neymar's not going to come over now. He's going to come over probably in his 30s.
Right.
If we're going to be completely honest.
No.
Same thing with Griezmann.
Yeah.
Messi and Ronaldo are still, but late 30s for them.
Right.
It's all about return on investment with the designated player.
Right.
And that's there's no risk in taking Ronaldo unless he asks for $20 million a year, because you know you're going to get that return on investment.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of.
So yeah, no, it definitely depends on the player.
There's incentive to sign a big player like that, but there's also a huge incentive as sure, and Andrea Pirlo is a big name, but if you ask any random person who Andrea Pirlo is, they're not going to know. So you ask someone who Messi is, they'll know. Right.
Like, honestly, like, no, you're right. Like Messi, I feel like is a more notable name than you're right. Like a Pirlo or Gerrard. Like Pirlo, like I'm just like he's known if you follow soccer. If you don't follow soccer, you're not gonna know. Messi's Messi. Like Messi, you know him because like you have that one friend that follows soccer and he obsesses over Messi. So like you're like, oh, right. Messi's
and
the best player.
He's been the poster boy for years. Like same thing with Ronaldo and even Neymar. They've been poster boys for years for that kind of thing. So it just kind of comes down to return of investment, and if they can get someone that big, they are willing to take the risk on it because they know they're going to get the investment back.
Right. So, I think... Alright, so let's transition to the other part of our topic on the MLS, which is some of it, which is the kind of development of young players in the MLS. The fact that we're seeing it become more and more of a place of let's sign, like, to not only maybe kickstart your career to go to Europe, but also a place for players to restart their career as well. Sure. We touched on that a little bit when we were talking about the designated player rule. So I think we've honestly seen a lot of talent come in to the MLS. Like if you think of, I think two notable wingers right away: Ezekiel Barco of Atlanta United, and Christian Pavone of LA Galaxy.
Sure.
Like those two have been notable names from Argentina. I mean, I think a lot of people from career mode would know them as high potential Argentinian wingers, but these are promising young Argentinian wingers that have shown that they're capable to play on a somewhat of a big stage, right?
Sure.
So, like Zlatan, I remember reading a quote from Zlatan, and he's like, "I'm not sure why Pavone's not even in Europe yet."
Right. Yeah, I remember that.
Like, so is the MLS now starting to become like an Eredivisie league, right? Or it's more of a developmental league, if anything.
It's becoming more developmental, and they're putting in legislation to help save that. So, Speaking of the designated player, they've made the young designated player list where you can add a younger player. As we talked about before, the designated player, the curve is going down. So not like COVID. The curve is going down. So like from 2014 to 2016. It was a 5-year difference. So it went from 20 to 23, then it went back to 25 in 2018, I believe. So you look at kind of that statistic, and you also look at the fact that there is proof of return of investment in
young players, right? Because you can sell them to Europe. I think a big case is Almiron.
Yeah, I was gonna say Atlanta United bought for him for $8 million, sold him for 25. That's a huge investment. Now the MLS also has put something else in to help have homegrown players used. So they've put in legislation to say, okay, you get a lesser percentage of the money that you get if you sell a non-homegrown player. So if you sell Almiron, they won't get 25. They won't get the 25 million, but they'll get less than what like a European club would get if they sold someone else for 25 million. Right. So I think the MLS is trying to kind of transition from that we play old players to a more developmental league.
Right.
And again, we talked about New York City, who shelled out a lot of money for David Villa, Lampard, and Pirlo.
Right.
They only have one European player, or they only have one player, one designated player from Europe.
Right.
And that's some Arsenal reject that's 23 years old.
Right.
So you look at kind of that way as well, how they've kind of not forced it, but they've but not only with the return of investment of a younger player, but the idea that now, younger players will give you that money back, will give you that investment. Again, we talked about Joseph Martinez, but you look at their other two designated players. You have Pity Martinez and Ezequiel Barco.
Right.
So again, all three of those players are designated players. I'm sure Barco will move on. I'm sure Martinez will move on. I'm sure both of the Martinezes will move on.
Right.
So I think, when you look at that kind of you look at that factor, you see how they're starting to pull away from that kind of idea.
Right, and I think what's interesting about the MLS, and again, they've also made this sport a little bit more Americanized to the American audience, is the fact that they also have a draft, right?
Right.
You pick players from colleges, and like the best players around the country in colleges, and they call it the MLS draft, and so that's another way to develop these homegrown type players. I mean, you were talking about players that come from Europe. Like, I'm thinking about a couple like Jesus Ferreira of FC Dallas, obviously is a big name, and then Joshua Sands of New York FC, who's another big name, who's been more of a developmental talent coming through the system and trying to become American talent. I think we also saw it with Jordan Morris as well.
Yeah.
In Seattle. I'm trying to think of a couple others. I think Chris Richards was another one, but he moved to Bayern's second team. He moved to Bayern's under 23s or something like that.
Right.
I mean, so there is talent going out.
Yeah.
There's talent being homegrown, and there's also talent going out. We're gonna talk about the talent going out in a second. But I think what's really interesting with the MLS is they've tried to because I'm thinking because the Chinese Super League also has started to make those rules to make sure they're trying to get the homegrown talent get more involved. The fact that you can't go out and sign Oscar and Hulk or Texera or Tevez,
right? Yeah,
for those lucrative, exorbitant contracts. You can't, you can't sign those players. You can't really you can't sign those players anymore. So that's what the MLS is trying to incorporate as well. I think another one was Zach Steffen. I think he was at Columbus Crew, right?
Yeah, and
he was at Columbus Crew, and now he moved to Man City. I mean, he's a promising young goalkeeper that's looking like he could take over for Tim Howard's duties, right? And now he's loaned. He's loaned into Bundesliga.
Yeah, and I know we're going to touch on this later, but we see a lot of younger American players going to different teams before going into the MLS draft or anything. There's a lot of factors that go into that. Number one, if you're really that talented, do you need to go into college and need to you'd rather be trained in academies? So you look at someone like Christian Pulisic, he lost 4 years.
No, he moved to Dortmund when he was 16, 17.
Right, so he would have lost 4 years if he would have gotten into the draft, or if he got into the draft that way.
Right.
Same thing with Josh Sargent. He would have lost time that he could have developed playing, and both of them have been standout players in Europe.
Right.
So you look at kind of that, and also the fact of, at the time they were still the MLS was still looked at as an old players' retirement home. So you factor all of that in, and you say, okay, why not go to Dortmund, who have this amazing track history with players?
Right.
Why not go to the Bundesliga, who's been basically a second home? You also talk about John Brooks, Wilson Chandler.
Not Wilson.
The right back Chandler, Timothy Chandler. Chandler.
Wilson Chandler's the basketball player.
I know. But yeah, you look at those players, and the only one that really stands out that was in the MLS until he left was Zach Steffen.
Right. I mean, even then, he's loaned from. I think he's at Dusseldorf or something like that.
Right.
So yeah, no, I think we'll go into now as to some of the American prospects that have moved to Europe to try to get into those academies, to try to start training instead of going through the MLS system and instead of going to college, instead of getting recognized in the MLS and start maybe moving away. I think a big thing here it has been The fact that, and I watched a thing on Tfue Football, the fact that why a lot of Americans go to Germany is the fact that you don't really need a work permit.
Yeah, it's easier to work there than
it's easier to get a work permit as long as you show proof that, hey, like, I'm part of, like, Dortmund's academy, or I'm part of, I'm part of this academy, or I'm, training to be a soccer player, right? As long as you show proof, like, they'll be like, okay, like, that's why we don't see as many English players go to England or anywhere else, because it's a lot harder to get a work permit. Germany, it's easier. Plus, I think Germany's also been renowned to train and develop English talent, right? Not English, American, sorry.
Right.
American talent. So there has been a lot of talks, and there's been a lot of talks about it, and I really do think the fact that you have guys like Serginho Dest, the fact that you had Pulisic, you have Sargent, you have Timothy Weah, the fact that you have some Chris Richards, like I alluded to earlier, like
Gio Reyna even.
Right, Gio Reyna, who's emerging at Dortmund right now. Like, you have a lot of talent scattered throughout Europe, and but also in the MLS. Would you say in the next few years, not this World Cup, because this World Cup is in 2 years, it's going to be a little bit difficult. But would you say by the time CONCACAF comes around, the Gold Cup, what's that? What's like Euros for America?
CONCACAF, isn't it? I know what you're talking. Copa America.
Copa America comes around. When the World Cup comes around, in let's say 4 or 5 years, 6 years even, would you see America as being a dominant talent? The fact that that they're starting to homegrown players, the fact that they have players that have such great potential, the fact that they are looking like a dominant side.
It takes a lot longer than 5 years. Germany, who's renowned for having a great soccer team, had to revamp their squad in the mid 2000s after losing 5-0 to 5-1 to England. Took them to 2014 to win the cup, and that's Germany.
Right.
Last time World Cup came around, we weren't even in it. I think of course, it also comes down to coaching.
Right.
I forget who was the coach at the time, but
Bruce Arians? No, that's.
It doesn't matter because
I think it is Bruce Arians.
Yeah. No, wait, Arians is dude. That's the one who coaches Tom Brady in the Bucs. Right. But yeah. No, but what I was saying was, it's going to take a lot more than I think 5-6 years to become a dominant force.
Right.
And I think, I think down the line, I'd say probably in 10-20 years, there's a chance. There's a big chance if we keep going down this path.
Right.
But if we don't, because we've seen like the United States Soccer League in the 80s make this huge boom and nothing happened from it.
Well, you sign guys like, what?
Pele and George Best. Yeah, but they had this soccer boom in the country. And, I mean, yeah, they had Alexis
because you had
Clint
like
Dempsey, you had those players.
Not in the 80s.
Well, no, but I'm saying that came from that boom in
right, yeah.
I think...
Landon Donovan, Tim Howard, yeah.
Yeah. And, sure, that comes from that. And I think down the line, and I don't think 5-6 years. I think in 5-6 years, if we see improvement, if we see, okay, we're getting to the World Cup, we're challenging in the group stage, I think I'd be more excited about that. But I think, personally, I don't think it'll be 5-6 years. I think it'll be a lot longer before we become a dominant team in the World Cup. I think, I'm not going to go and say we're going to win Copa America because there's Brazil, there's Argentina, there's Uruguay, there's Chile, there's already a lot of Mexico. There's a lot of great teams.
Colombia's another one, right?
Colombia's another one. Yeah, so I think there's a chance. I think because America last time in the Copa America, last time I remember, they went to the semifinals and got blown up by Argentina 3-0, I think. So, there's always that kind of, well, we're gonna probably do well in this competition. Of course, I think we won the Gold Cup.
Right.
But the Gold Cup's like Copa America for dummies. I mean, it's not.
Right.
It's not that big of an accomplishment. But I think if you look at it that way, sure, if we see progress in the next 5 to 6 years, we can say, okay, we can build off of that. But it has to be sustained progress over this many years.
Right.
It can't just be one big boom and then a fall, then a big boom and then a fall, because there's no way.
Well, no, I think a lot of people are looking at, like, I think there's now a lot more accessibility for Americans to find to find an academy, right?
Yeah.
I think, like, honestly, there's a lot more accessibility for them. I think another one that we're gonna talk about in in another video, or not another player, but Conrad de la Fuente. He's been training in Barcelona's youth academy for several years now. I mean, there is definitely a plethora of talent. I feel like now more than ever, there's been more of a surge to, find an academy, to start training when you're young, right? I feel like, granted, I think there's still going to be a lot more dominance in, let's say, like a baseball, a football, or a basketball. There's still going to be a lot more dominance in terms of recruiting, in terms of of kids wanting to play those sports. But I still feel like there are still a lot of kids that would want to play soccer.
Yeah.
Start training at a young age, and then finally getting into an academy.
Yeah, and again, you look at kind of this. This has to again be a sustained growth, and I think it will. You look at, also say the hotspots of people who come from South America, people who come from countries that football is huge in.
Right.
That's a huge factor as well, because they're going to be their first sport from the get-go is going to be soccer.
Yeah.
Football and basketball comes from kind of like American.
Right.
Even though football is a knockoff of rugby.
Right. Yeah, right.
But anyways, you look at that kind of idea that if you kind of target and say, okay, Miami, Texas, California, if you look at those areas and say, okay,
right,
these
large
are
Hispanic populations.
Right, you look at areas where soccer is going to be the number one sport, and go into those areas and recruit. That's a better chance. You have a better chance of building a more Americanized, or building a better American system. Of course, I forgot the name, but we had a really young talent from the I forgot, but who committed to Mexico over America, and that caused a lot of shock, I think, to a lot of people. But Mexico again, it has a better reputation. It's the building of the reputation, it's the sustained growth, and it's the targeting of these communities that soccer is a huge part of to build the kind of to build the idea and the brand and the reputation of the United States soccer. For the men, the women are killing it. I mean, they're amazing, but for the men, that's how they're going to need to do that.
Yeah, no, for sure, and I think that's definitely I mean, you look at the women's side of it, like, they've always been somewhat dominant. I think since the 90s, right? That's been, like, since the 90s on, they've always been that dominant side and, like, number one in the world or something like that. But I think what's really key here is the fact that there are Americans that want to play, and there's also a lot of Americans that have been spread over into different academies. And the fact that there's a lot of Americans spread over into different academies, I think really would help, push that surge to really keep going and make sure that they do have potential to become a dominant side. Maybe not in a World Cup sense, because there's always going to be France, Germany, Argentina, Spain, Brazil, England. There's always going to be those, but at least in America's side, there still could be some dominance. And I think that's really key here. I think that's going to wrap up today's video. I hope you guys did enjoy. Again, thank you to Raw Sports Talk for the suggestion and the topic. It was a great topic to research and to talk about.
If you have any suggestions about topics, make sure to DM us on Twitter and Instagram. Links will be in the description.
Right. Or comment down below. And also comment any of your opinions. Were we right about some stuff? Were we weren't? What do you guys think? What do you guys think about this stuff we talked about? Could America be a dominant side 6 years from now? Well, we're just gonna have to wait and see, and hopefully I'm hoping it's a positive from all these Americans going overseas and all these homegrown and the MLS making these moves to make more homegrown talent be a big factor. But yeah, I hope you guys did enjoy, and if we left any part of the argument out, or if anything you guys want to add, let us know in the comment section down below. And yeah, just like Raw Sports Talk, don't forget to DM us on Twitter or Instagram, or on the comments down below any suggestions or topics you'd like to see us cover. And if you enjoyed, like and subscribe. I hope you guys stay safe and have a good one.